Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Eons of Battle. We here make a ton of terrain, like a lot of terrain. And it's really fun. It's quite the process, coming up with a theme and then doing the concept art and iterating on that concept art and breaking it down into like the preeminent pieces and then getting those pieces designed and then test printing them and changing and fixing them. And then finally, we are left with a finished product and it is glorious. And I want to take a little trip down memory lane of some of the coolest projects that we've ever gotten to do. Starting with my favorite kill team board of all time, the Goblin Rave Cave. This board is so much fun to play on. Number one, kill team with no vantage, I think helps the game a lot. Also, I beat Scott the Miniature Maniac in kill team on this board. I love like the sulfuric yellow colors of this board with the little pop of turquoisey mushrooms. This board turned out so good. And it's got this like kind of ceiling to it, or the impression of a ceiling. And it works really well. Like it feels so dynamic when I'm playing on this board and my eyes see the physical roof, the boundary of this board. This board has seen so much action, a lot of action. How many games have I played on this? Maybe 20, 30 games of kill team on this board and some other games. But man, this board was so much fun to build and to put together and to just come up with the stalagmites and the stalactites and figuring out which is which and then trying to keep it straight in my head. This one was really cool. Then we've got the Alien Hive Colony. I remember this stuff. Like this stuff is bringing back some memories because we made this right when 10th edition Leviathan dropped. And so we were getting all excited and like pre-ordering our boxes. And this stuff has seen a ton of play because really it's just Elwall ruins, but like gross, disgusting Tyrannid Elwall ruins. And it is of course in my color scheme, Hive Fleet Behemoth, the greatest Hive Fleet, the one that nearly made the Ultramarines extinct. We made a full board of this stuff with like fish tank terrain and little styrofoam balls that we made extra like sticky and gooey. This stuff, it's a little bit beat up now because we grab it so often because all the time we just need like a couple more pieces of bigger line of sight blocking terrain. And so sometimes we'll like even craft these like lovely gothic like battlefields and then we just need a little bit more. So it's like, Tyrannid landed right there. And so there's just a little bit of like Tyrannid goodness growing in the corner. But speaking of Gothic, our Starship Bridge was super fun because we started to play around with like the limits of what we could do with 3D printing some elements in opaque resin and some elements in clear resin to make these stained glass windows and the holograms of some little projector tables with a little space battle happening on top of it. I can just see like the Inquisitors and Inquisitorial agents just huddled around this computer terminal and looking at the entire battlefield. It also reminds me a lot of like the menus in Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate, which I was probably playing a bunch of at the time. But man, this stuff, like I really like the stained glass bricks. These work great for terrain, but I also just love little kind of scatter elements that add like a granularity to the board. And all of these little terminals do exactly that. So that when you actually get down to the models level, to check line of sight and to check like shooting angles and stuff, you get to see your models kind of framed by stuff like this. I love, when we were filming the video, I remember Nick figured out how to get LEDs to shine up through the clear resin of this little computer terminal, and it looked really cool. But taking a little break from 40K, we made the Twisted Train Station, based on kind of like the design elements of a little game called Malifaux, which I love Malifaux. I've only played Malifaux, I think 3 times, but I have 3 Malifaux crews because I love the miniatures and I love the weird world from Weird. The company that makes Malifaux is called Weird, but it's kind of like a Wild West turn of the century environment. And so we came up with these lovely little like planted areas that we would see in a train station. Like you would see some nice sculpted plants and things. And so we thought, well, they want the beautiful plants, but they want to keep people off the plants. And so, how do you do that? With a sign? No, you make the plants into literal death traps. You got to keep hold of your kiddos because if you let them wander off and they try to climb into some of the little plant areas, it's it's gonna be a bad time because the all of these little traps and evil machinations, just a little, like all of this whole set was basically dry brushed. And I just want to play. I want to play Malifaux right now. Look at this thing. You don't want to step on there. There's bear traps. There's little punji sticks. There's beautiful flowers that like shoot nails. And of course, the lovely trees that are just a giant like cone of death and buzzsaws. I feel like I went really subtle on the blood. I feel like I could have put a lot more blood on these. But you know what? I could always add it, just a little bit more blood. Maybe the next time I play Malifaux, I'll spruce these up a little bit with just a little bit more gore. But returning to the grimdark galaxy was the Orc Brewery. This was our love letter to Kill Team because we played so much Kill Team on the Octeris terrain, the original orc kind of crunchy orc settlement terrain. And so we made like essentially an expansion pack to it. It fits perfectly with the original terrain, and it has a little flair of our own because it's kind of an orc bar, complete with a rockstar stage, which is so great. It's got all of the so the original orc set, you can essentially make a square with it, but we came up with corners and short walls and long walls and little like tight corners. We have inner corners and outy corners. Like we can make a proper orc fortress, like kind of an orc world with the Orc Brewery terrain. We took this to Adepticon and we played another game with Scott the Miniature Maniac and some other folks on this terrain, and it held up nicely. We're not necessarily delicate with our terrain or miniatures or anything, but it's held up really, really nicely. And it was really fun to paint. Orc stuff is so nice. You can get so messy and so sloppy with the painting, and it just works out so perfectly because that's how the orcs do. And the Orc Brewery has probably seen the most play out of any of our terrain. It just works so nicely as not in line of sight blocking terrain, incidental terrain, and as elevated platforms. You can't quite get the plunging fire rule, but honestly, I've played like 50 games of 40K. I've never seen the plunging fire rule ever come up once. Although I guess you could. If you double stacked these, you could actually get the plunging fire ability. But I really, really like this terrain. Orc. But as much as I love the orcs, the Black Templar are my main squeeze, and my Black Templar terrain, the crashed spaceship, has been behind my army, just like framing it and just giving it like a reason to exist. But once upon a time, the crashed spaceship landed on the orc planet. I guess it didn't. It had an emergency landing, a tactical crash, if you will, to deposit my orcs on the battlefield so that they could do battle against Nick's evil blue orcs. But it's like a baby. Look at this thing. I just want to rock it to sleep. And then this is just a little bit of it. There's so much more. There's a full spaceship, and it makes for some really, really thematic terrain, just smashed into the ground. Like I'm sure all of the Space Marines were fine because they have like that big bulky armor. There was probably a lot of crew, like a human crew in this thing. I don't know if they survived the emergency landing, but man, this thing is kind of heavy because it's all printed in resin. I want to hit Sean with it. Not too hard, just to let him know who's boss. The mining colony was a set of terrain that made me not eBay my Genestealer cult army. I've been trying to collect Genestealer for so long, but there was a bunch of the models in the range I wasn't a super big fan of, and there was a bunch of things I needed to collect that I didn't want to buy. And so the mining colony gave me a great excuse to kind of fill the ranks of my army with the vehicles and the equipment that I wanted, like the Achilles Ridge Runner. Or this is my Achilles Ridge Runner, because I feel like the Hot Wheels thing that Games Workshop made doesn't make sense for the Genestealer cult. I like to think the Achilles Ridge Runner is the thing that every single day transports the Genestealer cultists with their, big thermos of coffee to and from the mines. But on the day of Ascension, they slap some stolen weapons on there and drive it into the heat of battle. And I want more of these. Nick, can you print me like 2 more of these? On the mining colony set, I tried out some new color schemes, some new painting styles, and it did make me really excited to actually keep going with my Genestealer cult army because they were nearly already listed on eBay. And then I just thought, maybe there's a little something here. And I'm glad I did because this thing is cool. But speaking of really cool, the Pestilent Forest, the Death Guard terrain. I have been slowly but steadily building a Death Guard army, and I was playing a bunch of Chaos Gate, and I really loved the idea of just the plague spewing out of the ground. Like the plague terrain kind of works perfectly, especially in like Gothic areas, because Nurgle, he brings his blessings to all. And so, it's a nice Gothic city, it could use a couple of, nice little trees. And, maybe the trees have mouths and eyeballs and tongues, but they're pretty, nice little trees that just keep an eye on the goings on of the battlefield. Oh, and it's painted in my Death Guard colors. I have had 10 Death Guard Terminators sitting on my desk, on my painting desk, for probably like 4 months now. There's not enough time in the day, but I love my Death Guard, and the Death Guard terrain is the nice little cherry on top of the force. But speaking of cherries, the Dark Elf Encampment was another pack that we did, and it was all about the Dark Elves. Drukhari, which is what they're called now. I have been steadily, slowly but surely building my Death Guard army because I'm going to have a full 2,000 points by December of this year, and I had to take a little pit stop on the way to build up a bunch of Dark Eldar terrain. And one of those pieces is this guy, this is like if Dark Eldar need to move something, like if Dark Eldar need to get a U-Haul, this is the U-Haul. It just floats behind like their raiders and their ravagers. And it's got a nice little, got some cargo space for all of the precious cargo the Death Guard need to transport. In game, I use this as a raider, and I have painted it in my rack color scheme. I've fallen in love with the racks, the weird kind of skinless Dark Eldar units that they're just like the Dark Eldar are the bad guys, but the racks are the baddest of the bad guys, or at least the most unhinged. And I really like the look of these disgusting vehicles floating above my relatively nice and upbeat bases. Doing all of these projects month after month after month and trying so many different things, it taught us like all about exactly what we can do with terrain. And then we took all of that knowledge and we turned it into the Starship Interior. And in my opinion, the greatest spaceship terrain of all time. With a bunch of very simple pieces, with a couple of different designs, we can make the coolest spaceships. Like, if anybody has played the game FTL, or I guess Space Hulk, like you can build like the rooms and just the corridors and the twisting hallways of a spaceship, perfectly designed for wargaming miniatures. You could fit most like infantry sized miniatures on this stuff. You could probably even squeeze a dreadnought in some of these pieces. But this stuff, the modularity and the buildability and just the vibe of this stuff is we have so much of this. We have 2 humongous boxes of this terrain, and it's been so much fun to play on. We had to this is a standard like Warhammer size table. We actually had to increase the size of this table so that we could actually fit exactly what we wanted to build out of this stuff. But I feel like the Starship Interior is our magnum opus. But we learned a lot doing it, and we're only gonna get better from here. But speaking of the Starship Interior, we always knew that we wanted to do some interior to our starship, and we thought what better than clones with the Cloning Bay. The part 2, a little bit inspired by 40K, a little bit inspired by The Matrix, a little bit inspired by all things grisly and gruesome. The clones just fit into these towers, using some clear resin to make these kind of semi-transparent screens where you just see the ghost of the little guy inside of there. These are super fun as objective tokens. They actually do block a fair bit of movement and line of sight, and they look so good in situ. In the bigger rooms that we designed for them, they're super fun to fight over. And it's really fun to come up with rules for these things because if the clones are almost done, they could join the fight. You can actually do some resurrection rules for some of the models of fighting near them. And it's also fun. I had this idea of if you do any shooting attacks within 6 inches of the cloning bay, then the objective, the value of this terrain piece goes down because you're accidentally shooting into the clones. And so you're losing some of that prized resource. These have been really, really fun. All of this terrain and a lot more is available on our website. I love having it on our website because it's all beautifully in one place, but also because we can offer a little bit more on our website. Getting a terrain tier membership on our website gets you 1 credit per month. That can be used on whatever cool thing we just came out with, but it can also be used on any previous terrain pack we have ever made. It is the best way to support us doing what we do, and it gets you some lovely terrain. And on our website, we also have our new merch, like the Nick and Jay dice. I'm not biased, but I do think that the Jay dice rolls a little bit better than the Nick dice. In fact, it's true. 5-1, I win. Making terrain is something we here at Eons of Battle are pretty darn passionate about, but please, in the comments below, let us know what terrain you would like us to make, because we've done a whole bunch of stuff, but I mean, we still have tons and tons of ideas, and we're always looking for some more. Thanks for watching.